I knew the exact moment the company was doomed. It wasn't when the stock dipped, and it wasn't when they replaced the break room coffee with some organic sludge that tasted like distilled disappointment. It was the moment Bradley walked in. The name's George Williams, but everyone calls me Mac. I'm 48, spent 10 years in the Navy before jumping into tech back in 2004. Been at TechFlow Dynamics for 6 years now, watching this place grow from a scrappy startup to whatever this corporate nightmare has become. Been thinking about that fishing boat lately, maybe early retirement if I can swing it. Bradley was the new CTO, a 28-year-old venture capital experiment wrapped in a fitted vest and smelling like sandalwood and unearned confidence. He walked into the conference room like he was Moses parting the Red Sea, except the Red Sea was just a bunch of tired engineers praying for decent severance packages. I was sitting in the corner nursing a styrofoam cup of lukewarm coffee, watching him survey the room. I've been here 6 years. In tech years, that makes me a prehistoric fossil. I'm the ghost in the machine. I'm the reason the servers don't catch fire when Black Friday traffic hits. But to Bradley, I was just an old guy in a flannel shirt who looked like he needed a nap and a beer. "Listen up, team," Bradley started, clapping his hands together like a seal asking for a fish. "I've been reviewing the architecture, and honestly, it's a mess. It's legacy garbage. We're pivoting to a microservices-first AI-driven ecosystem by Q3. He threw a slide up on the projector. It was a bunch of meaningless circles and arrows that looked like a football play drawn by a toddler on Adderall. I squinted at it. He was proposing deleting the central logic gate of our entire logistics platform. That legacy garbage he was talking about, that was Ironforge. That was my baby. That was the code I wrote starting in 2018 when this company was barely keeping the lights on. The system really proved itself during the 2020 logistics nightmare. While everyone else's supply chains were collapsing like dominoes, Ironforge kept us running. Saved the company about $25 million in losses during that mess. Not that anyone remembers that now. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady. I hadn't spoken in a meeting in 3 months. Heads turned. "That garbage handles 90% of our vendor compliance. You delete that node and you're not just pivoting, you're lobotomizing the company." Bradley turned to me. He had that smile, the one that doesn't reach the eyes, the one practiced in a mirror while listening to Gary Vaynerchuk podcasts. He looked at my gray beard, my faded Carhartt jacket, and then checked his Apple Watch. "And you are?" he asked, feigning ignorance. He knew who I was. I was the line item on the budget that the CFO couldn't explain, but refused to cut. "I'm Mac," I said, keeping it simple. "I built the backbone you're trying to surgically remove." Bradley chuckled. It was a wet, condescending sound. "Right, Mac. Look, old-timer, I appreciate what you did back in the Stone Age, but we're not running a history museum here. We're building the future. And frankly, your monolithic code is holding us hostage. We need agility. We need velocity. We don't need whatever this dinosaur framework is." The words hung in the air like a fart in an elevator. The other engineers looked down at their laptops, terrified. They knew. They knew I wasn't just the architect. They knew I wasn't even technically an employee. But Bradley was too busy admiring his own reflection in the glass whiteboard to do his due diligence. See, back in 2016, when TechFlow was nothing but a chaotic startup with 3 lawsuits and a dream, they couldn't afford me. I was a freelance developer with a rate that made CFOs weep. So my lawyer, Scott, a shark who operates out of a strip mall next to a vape shop, came up with a different arrangement. I didn't sign an employment contract. I signed a licensing agreement. I incorporated my own LLC, Williams Tech Solutions, and I licensed the Ironforge platform to them. Think of it like Adobe or Microsoft. You don't buy the software, you buy the right to use it. And like any landlord renting out a penthouse to a bunch of rowdy college kids, I kept a key. The company processes about $80 million in revenue through my code every year now. They pay me a quarterly licensing fee of $60 grand, disguised as salary for tax purposes. But the real contract, the one that matters, is between Williams Tech Solutions LLC and TechFlow Dynamics Inc. Bradley didn't know that. Bradley saw a middle-aged man with gray hair and assumed I was a legacy hire, some diversity quota from a bygone era. He thought he was firing a rusted cog. He didn't realize he was trying to evict the landlord while still living in the house. "Okay, Bradley," I said, leaning back in my chair, the plastic creaking under the weight of my exhaustion. "You're the boss. Agility, velocity, got it. He smirked, turning his back to me to point at his nonsense diagram again. We're going to start sunsetting the old modules effective immediately. HR will be doing some restructuring to align with the new vision. Restructuring. Corporate speak for firing the people who actually know how the lights work. I didn't argue. I didn't throw my coffee at him even though the urge was strong. I just sat there watching him pontificate about synergies and bandwidth. My heart wasn't even racing. That's the thing about military training. You don't panic when the rookie pulls the pin on the grenade. You just check your watch and calculate the blast radius. I looked at the date on my phone. My licensing contract renewed automatically every quarter unless contested. The next payment was due in 4 days. Paragraph 4 of my contract was very specific about what happens if the licensee attempts to modify, reverse engineer, or disparage the integrity of the provided software. And paragraph 6 was the nuclear option. The freeze-out started subtle, like black mold in a bathroom wall. First, it was the calendar invites. The weekly architecture sync dropped off my Outlook. Then, the strategy alignment meeting. I was sitting in my cubicle listening to the muffled sounds of laughter coming from the glass-walled conference room 10 feet away. Bradley was in there holding court. Through the glass, I saw him pointing at a whiteboard that I used to own. He was erasing my diagrams, complex functional flowcharts of data logic, and replacing them with buzzwords like holistic synergy and cloud-native mindset. It's funny how fast you become invisible. 6 years of 80-hour weeks, 6 years of waking up at 3 a.m. to patch a server leak so the CEO could buy his third boat. And suddenly, I was a ghost. People I'd had lunch with for years started avoiding eye contact in the hallway. They smelled death on me. In corporate America, getting fired is contagious. If you stand too close to the victim, management might decide you're part of the disease. Then came Kevin, the new guy. Bradley introduced him on Tuesday. Team, meet Kevin. He's our new product evangelist. He's going to be spearheading the transition to the new stack. Kevin looked like he was 12. He was wearing pristine white sneakers that had never touched a dirty server room floor. He came over to my desk holding a matcha latte, looking like a puppy who just peed on the rug but thinks he's a good boy. "Hey, Mac, right?" Kevin said, beaming. "Bradley told me you're the, legacy historian. I'd love to pick your brain about the old code before we deprecate it." Historian. Deprecate. The kid was speaking corporate like it was his native language. I swiveled my chair around slowly. "Kevin, do you know what a load balancer is?" He blinked. "Well, yeah, concept-wise. We use AWS for that, right? It's all serverless now." "Serverless," I said, turning back to my screens. "Because the cloud is just magic sky pixie dust, not actual hardware running in a warehouse in Virginia that melts if you don't optimize your queries." "Good luck, Kevin." He wandered off looking confused. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. He was walking into a minefield with a map drawn by a narcissist. By Thursday, my access to the staging environment was revoked. I got a generic system email. Permissions updated by admin BM. I didn't fight it. I didn't storm into Bradley's office demanding answers. I simply opened my personal laptop, my trusty beat-up ThinkPad that held the keys to the kingdom, and checked the bank account for Williams Tech Solutions, LLC. It was the first of the month. The quarterly licensing fee for the Ironforge core platform was due at midnight. Usually the old CFO, a guy named Carl, who actually understood how contracts worked, had it on autopay. But Carl had been restructured last month too. New finance director was some MBA who probably thought IP stood for intellectual property instead of internet protocol. I refreshed the page. No pending transaction. I refreshed it again an hour later. Nothing. I sat there, the blue light of the monitor reflecting in my reading glasses, feeling a strange mix of adrenaline and calm. It was happening. They were ghosting the payment. In their arrogance, they assumed that since I was sitting in a cubicle collecting what looked like a salary, which was actually a retainer fee disguised as payroll for tax simplicity on their end, they didn't need to pay the vendor invoice. They thought they owned me. Therefore, they thought they owned the code. I pulled up the contract. I keep a digital copy, but I also have the original signed in wet ink by the founder, safe in a fireproof box at home next to my discharge papers and my wife's life insurance policy. Clause 3.1. Payment obligations. Failure to remit licensing fees within 24 hours of the due date constitutes a material breach. Clause 3.2. Cure period. There's no cure period for willful non-payment or unauthorized modification of the source material. Bradley had already violated the unauthorized modification clause by trying to patch his new microservices on top of my core without my API keys, and now he was about to violate the payment clause. I could have walked into his office. I could have warned him. I could have said, "Hey, Slick, you're about to default on the software that runs your entire inventory system." But then I remembered Old Timer. I remembered the way he laughed when he said dinosaur framework. I remembered the way he looked at me like I was an ugly piece of furniture he couldn't wait to curb. So I let the clock tick. At 4 p.m. on Friday, HR sent me a calendar invite for 4:30 p.m. Subject, quick sync. Location, meeting room B. This was it. Friday firing. The classic move. Do it at the end of the day so the employee can't cause a scene, and the rest of the staff has the weekend to forget they existed. I started packing. Not much, just a few photos, my lucky screwdriver set, and a succulent that was clinging to life despite the fluorescent lighting. I wiped my company-issued laptop. I didn't just delete files. I ran a military-grade scrubber on the drive. Not because I had anything to hide, but because I'm a professional and I don't leave fingerprints. I checked the bank account one last time. Still zero. No payment. Contract breach confirmed. I stood up, put on my jacket, and grabbed the manila folder I'd brought from home. Inside was the contract, highlighted in neon yellow like a roadmap to their destruction. Time to go to the principal's office. Meeting room B was a glass fishbowl near the elevators, designed so everyone could see your shame as you got the axe. Bradley was there, of course, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, looking like he was posing for a Forbes 30 Under 30 cover. Sitting at the table was Rachel from HR. Rachel was a nice lady who communicated exclusively in sad smiles and pamphlets about Cobra insurance. She looked like she wanted to be anywhere else, possibly dead. The health insurance thing had been nagging at me. At 48, with a bum knee from my Navy days and blood pressure that wasn't getting any younger, getting fired meant scrambling for coverage. Cobra's expensive as hell, but that fishing boat was looking more like a pipe dream if I had to burn through savings on medical bills. "Have a seat, Mac," Rachel said, her voice soft like she was talking to a spooked horse. I sat. I placed my manila folder on the table. Bradley eyed it suspiciously, then smirked. He probably thought it was a desperate attempt to show him project charts to save my job. The moment of truth was here. 6 years of work, 6 years of keeping this place running, all coming down to this glass box where careers go to die. "So, Mac," Bradley started, not letting Rachel do her job. "We've been evaluating the team structure, and as we move toward this high-velocity, cloud-native future, we're finding that your skill set doesn't align with the trajectory of the company." "Trajectory," I repeated, nodding slowly, "like a missile into a mountain." Bradley's jaw tightened. "We're terminating your employment, effective immediately. Rachel has the paperwork, standard severance, 2 weeks' pay. We'll need your badge and laptop." Rachel slid a stack of papers across the table. "We also require you to sign this NDA and non-disparagement agreement to receive the severance," she added, looking at her hands. I didn't touch the papers. I looked at Bradley. "Just to be clear," I said, my voice steady, "you're terminating our professional relationship completely." "That's what fired means, old-timer," Bradley snapped. The mask was slipping. He wanted me out. He wanted my salary budget so he could hire 3 more Kevins. "Roger that," I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my badge. I slid it across the table. Then I took the company laptop out of my bag and placed it next to the badge. "Good," Bradley said, pushing off the wall. "Security will escort you out." "Wait," I said. I placed my hand on the manila folder. "We're done with the employment part. Now we need to discuss the vendor relationship." Bradley frowned. "What are you talking about?" I opened the folder. Inside was the licensing agreement for the Ironforge core platform, signed in 2016, renewed automatically every quarter. I spun it around so they could read it. "I don't work for you, Bradley. I never really did. My company, Williams Tech Solutions, licenses the technology that runs your procurement, your logistics, and your vendor payments. I was just part of the package, on-site support included in the premium tier. Bradley laughed. He actually laughed. He picked up the contract, glanced at the cover page, and tossed it back down. This is some old paperwork from the startup days. We own everything you wrote while you were here. Intellectual property assignment. It's standard. We own the code. Actually, I said, tapping paragraph 4. Read it. All code, architecture, and algorithms remain the sole property of the licensor, Williams Tech Solutions. The licensee, TechFlow Dynamics, is granted a non-exclusive, revocable right to use the software, contingent upon timely payment and adherence to usage guidelines. I watched his eyes scan the paragraph. I saw the moment the words hit his retinas, but his brain refused to process them. It was too absurd for him. In his world, developers were cogs. Companies owned everything. The idea that some old-timer had outsmarted the system before he was even hired was incomprehensible. This is... He spat. You were on payroll. That voids this. Check with legal, I said. I was on a retainer, taxed as a 1099 contractor for the first 2 years, then moved to a W-2 structure for administrative convenience per specific addendum signed by the founder. But the IP rights, those never transferred. Williams Tech Solutions still holds the copyright registration with the Library of Congress. Rachel's mouth was hanging open. She was smart enough to understand contracts, unlike the golden boy next to her. I stood up. Here's the situation, Bradley. You just fired the on-site support. That's fine. I was tired of the coffee anyway. But you also missed the quarterly licensing payment that was due yesterday. That's a material breach. I'm not paying you a dime, Bradley hissed, his face turning a shade of red that clashed with his vest. Okay, I said. I walked to the door. I paused and looked back at Rachel, whose face had gone pale. Rachel, you might want to print out hard copies of the payroll data. Just a friendly tip. I looked at Bradley one last time. Clause 6, Bradley. Look it up. Unauthorized use of the software following a breach of contract will result in immediate suspension of service. You have 72 hours to cure the breach. But since you just fired the only person who knows how to keep the engine running, I'd say you have less than that. Get out, Bradley yelled. I walked out. I didn't look back. I walked past my old desk, past Kevin, who was aggressively typing nothing, past the break room with its terrible coffee. I walked out into the parking lot, the air thick with Texas humidity. I lit my first cigarette in 6 months. It tasted like freedom and poor life choices. I got in my truck, a beat-up Ford F-250 that I trusted more than any human being, and tossed the manila folder on the passenger seat. They thought they fired an employee. They just evicted their landlord, and they didn't even have a spare key. Back at my apartment, a one-bedroom that smelled like coffee and soldering iron, I set up my command center. I wasn't going to hack them. I didn't need to. Hacking is illegal. What I was doing was strictly administrative enforcement of a binding contract. I opened my laptop and logged into the Williams Tech Solutions remote admin panel. It communicated with the TechFlow servers via a heartbeat signal. Every hour, their server pinged mine. Am I still allowed to exist? And for 6 years, my server replied, yes, carry on, i.e. Poured a glass of bourbon, the good stuff, Maker's Mark, not the rot gut I used to drink. At 48, life's too short for bad whiskey. I took a sip and felt the burn chase away the lingering taste of corporate betrayal. On my screen, the status lights were all green. Inventory module, active. Vendor API, active. Payroll gateway, active. The system was humming along, processing orders, moving money, keeping the company alive. $80 million a year flowed through my code like blood through arteries. I navigated to the license status tab. Current status, grace period. Grace period ends T-minus 48 hours. Bradley had called my bluff. He thought the contract was a prop, some desperate Hail Mary from a washed-up developer. He thought I was just a bitter old man waving paper around. He didn't understand that the code I wrote was paranoid. I wrote it that way because I knew people like him existed. The software verified its license against a secure blockchain every hour. It was immutable, unhackable, and absolutely unforgiving. I had learned that lesson in the Navy. Trust, but verify, and always have a backup plan. I changed the setting from grace period to strict enforcement. Then I queued up a command. Revoke license key 001. I didn't hit enter yet. I wanted to give them the weekend. Let them enjoy their mimosas. Let Bradley brag to his brunch friends about how he trimmed the fat at the office. The system was designed to do a hard check at 8 a.m. Monday morning when the transaction volume spiked for the week. I spent the weekend doing things I hadn't done in years. I slept past 6 a.m. I went to a diner and ate eggs that were swimming in grease. I didn't check my email. I didn't answer the frantic automated alerts that started pinging my burner phone around Sunday noon when the system started noticing the license server was unreachable. Sunday night, the bourbon bottle was half empty and my resolve was full. I looked at the clock, 7:55 a.m. Monday, the TechFlow offices would be waking up. The warehouse teams in Texas and Nevada would be logging in to process the weekend orders. The automated procurement bots would be attempting to order $2 million worth of raw materials. I hovered my mouse over the revoke button. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is keying a car. This was business. This was a landlord changing the locks on a tenant who trashed the place and refused to pay rent. Paragraph 6, I whispered to the empty room. I hit enter. On the screen, the status lights flickered. Inventory module, unlicensed. Vendor API, access denied. Payroll, gateway, critical failure. The cascading red text was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. It was poetry written in error codes. I took a sip of bourbon. It went down smooth this time. At 8:03 a.m., the first text came in. It wasn't from Bradley. It was from Kevin. Mac, OMG, everything is down. Everything. The dashboard just says, please contact administrator. Bradley is screaming at the PS servers. He literally kicked a rack. I smiled, eating a piece of cold toast. Kicking the hardware, universal sign of a man who has no idea how software works. At 8:30 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then again. I imagined the scene, the warehouse floor in Nevada grinding to a halt because the scanners couldn't authenticate inventory, trucks lining up at loading docks, drivers screaming because the digital manifests were blank, customer service lines lighting up like a Christmas tree as thousands of orders failed to process. At 9 a.m., the phone rang again. This time, the caller ID said TechFlow HQ. I picked up and put it on speaker while I watered my succulent. Hello, I answered, my voice groggy, feigning sleep. Mac, this is Bradley. His voice was an octave higher than usual, tight like he was being strangled by his own vest. Look, we have a situation. The system is down, all of it. We think it's a logic bomb. Did you leave something running? I don't work there anymore, Bradley, I said, spraying the plant. I returned my laptop. I have no access. Don't give me that, he shouted. I could hear panic in the background, phones ringing, people yelling. The error message says, license invalid. What did you do? Oh, I said, feigning dawning realization. The license. Yeah, I told you about that on Friday. Did you pay the invoice? I told you we're not paying that. It's extortion. It's a contract, Bradley. And since you didn't pay and since you fired the on-site admin, the software has reverted to its default state, which is off. Turn it back on, he demanded. Right now, or I will sue you into the ground. I will ruin you. Bradley, I said, my voice dropping to that cold steel tone I used when training junior sailors. You're currently using unauthorized intellectual property. My lawyer is drafting a cease and desist as we speak. If you attempt to bypass the lock, that's a violation of the DMCA. That's a federal crime. Do you look good in orange jumpsuits? Might clash with your vest. There was silence, then a muffled voice in the background. It sounded like legal counsel. I heard the words, she's right, and liability. Just fix it, Bradley pleaded, his bluster evaporating. We're losing $4,000 a minute. That sounds like a you problem, I said. I'm unemployed. I have a lot of free time, but I don't do charity work for companies that fire me. What do you want? I want you to put the CEO on the phone. He's in a board meeting. Then drag him out because in about 10 minutes, the vendor autopay system is going to try to wire payments to your suppliers. And since the encryption keys are locked, it's going to fail. Your supply chain will officially be dead by lunch. I heard running footsteps. A new voice came on the line. Deep, booming, but currently shaking. It was Carl, the CEO, the man who had bought his third boat while I was patching the 2020 holes. Mac, Carl said, what the hell is going on? Morning, Carl, I said. pleasantly. I believe your CTO evicted your landlord and now you're locked out of the house. Carl tried to play the "we're a family" card immediately. Mac, look, emotions are high. Bradley made a mistake. He's young. He didn't understand the nuances of your arrangement, but we can fix this. Just turn the servers back on. Come in and we'll discuss a raise. A big one. I was sitting on my porch now, feet up on the railing, watching my neighbor wrestle with his lawnmower. He was winning, unlike Carl. I don't want a raise, Carl, I said, and I don't want my job back. That bridge didn't just burn, it evaporated. Then what? What is this, blackmail? It's a vendor dispute, I corrected. You are currently in possession of proprietary software that you haven't paid for. Since you terminated the support contract, I am exercising my right to terminate the license. You have two options. I paused. Let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Option A. You migrate to a new system. Bradley seems to think he can build a cloud-native AI ecosystem. Go ahead, build it. It took me 6 years to build Ironforge. Maybe he can do it in 6 hours. Good luck. We can't do that, Carl snapped. We're dead in the water without your platform. Option B. You purchase a one-time perpetual license for the source code. You buy Williams Tech Solutions IP. You own it. I walk away. You get the keys, the documentation, everything. You never see me again. Fine, Carl said instantly. Fine, we'll buy it. How much? $850,000, I said. That's insane, Carl roared. That's extortion. That's the valuation, I said calmly. It's exactly what you'd pay a consulting firm to rebuild this from scratch, plus a nuisance fee for having to listen to Bradley call me old-timer. I won't pay it. Okay, good luck with the migration. Oh, and Carl, the compliance audit logs start purging in 1 hour to free up storage space. Hope you're not expecting any regulatory visits this quarter. I need time, Carl said, sounding defeated. You have 59 minutes, I said. I'll send the DocuSign to your personal email, assuming you still have email access when the authentication server goes down. 45 minutes later, Carl called back. We're ready to sign, he said, but we need assurance the system comes back online immediately. The second the wire hits my account, I push a patch that updates the license key to perpetual. The red lights turn green. Business as usual. Sending the wire now. I refreshed my bank app, pending transaction, plus $850,000. Source, TechFlow Dynamics. It's there, I said, my heart skipping a beat for the first time all weekend. Unlock it, Mac. I tabbed over to my terminal. Command, update license status perpetual. Command, restore all services. Enter. 2 minutes later, Kevin texted, We are green. Systems are booting. People are cheering. It's like the end of Apollo 13 in here. I didn't cheer. I felt a sudden crushing exhaustion. It was over. I had won. I had secured enough money to buy that fishing boat, maybe a nice cabin by the lake. Hell, I could retire tomorrow if I wanted. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in the lobby of Steelbridge Solutions. The director of engineering, a guy named Anthony who looked like a walrus in a tie, came out to greet me. Mac, Anthony boomed, I heard you're a free agent. Rumor has it you burned TechFlow to the ground and then sold them the ashes. I just enforced a contract, Anthony, I said. Strictly business. Well, I like business, Anthony grinned. We need someone who understands how things really work, someone who's been in the trenches. 6 months later, Steelbridge launched Steelbridge Prime. It destroyed the market. TechFlow's stock dropped 15% in the first quarter. They were stuck with a legacy system they barely understood, maintained by a team of terrified juniors. I heard through the grapevine that Bradley eventually quit. He pivoted to crypto evangelism. Figures. As for me, I'm sitting in my new home office with a glass of top-shelf bourbon and a view of the lake. I'm not happy exactly. Happiness is for people who don't know how the sausage is made. But I'm satisfied. I'm balanced. And that fishing boat is docked right outside my window. Sometimes late at night, I check the logs of the new system I built for Steelbridge. I think about the guys like me all over the country. The invisible architects who keep the lights on while the Bradleys of the world take credit for the electricity. We're out here, we're watching, and we read the fine print. So next time some kid in a vest calls you old-timer or dismisses your work as legacy garbage, don't get mad. Just make sure you own the keys. And if you have to burn the house down, make sure you charge them for the matches.